What's going on, gardeners? It's Sunday, September 12th, and it's a beautiful late summer day here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina. Today, I'm going to show you all the biggest mistake that I made with my young citrus tree. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon storefront and spread shop in the video description for a list of the gardening products I use and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated. While this video is going to be about my Owari Satsuma citrus tree right here, this lesson will apply to pretty much any grafted fruit tree, because this is a very common problem gardeners face when planting young grafted fruit trees, and that problem is the alternate bearing fruit cycle. If I were to plant a fruit tree from seed, whether it be an apple, peach, citrus, avocado, or most any other kind of fruit tree, that tree would progress along a natural cycle from seedling to adolescence to maturity. There are two problems with growing most fruit trees from seed. Number one, most fruit trees from seed have been cross-pollinated, so when you plant fruit tree seed, you'll get a genetically random new variety that is, statistically speaking, of lower quality than the parent fruit. And number two, most seed-grown fruit trees take anywhere from 7 to 15 years to become old enough to flower and produce and hold fruit to maturity. And it can take even longer than that for the tree to gain enough age for it to be in its prime for fruiting and have the best quality fruit. You can conceive a child and have them get their driver's license in many cases before you can get your seed-grown apple, orange, or avocado tree in its prime fruit production age, if you can wrap your mind around that. To get around that problem, we grow grafted fruit trees, because grafted fruit trees often fruit within 1 to 3 years, depending on the variety, which saves us a ton of time to get our first harvest. With a grafted fruit tree, you grow a specific rootstock from seed that has special properties you want, like a dwarfing rootstock or a disease-resistant rootstock or a nematode-resistant rootstock. Once those seed-grown rootstock plants reach a caliper of around 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch, they're cut to a height of around 4 to 8 inches, and a piece of scion wood is grafted onto them. Scion wood is a young branch from a fruit tree that is fully mature and generally of a known variety that is very high quality. For example, this tree right here is probably a rootstock that was about 1 year old that had a piece of wood from a 30-year-old orange tree in peak production grafted onto it. And this has two distinct benefits. Number one, this tree becomes a clone of a top quality variety. The Owari Satsuma is one of the highest quality mandarin oranges ever discovered, but there was only ever one Owari Satsuma that naturally grew from seed over a century ago. Every single Owari Satsuma ever planted since, and there have been countless millions planted worldwide, can all be traced back to a single seed-grown tree. They're all clones of a single ancient parent, so I'm getting a clone of one of the best-known trees ever discovered instead of rolling the dice with a random cross. When you buy grafted fruit trees, you are guaranteed to get a good quality named variety. The second benefit is grafted fruit trees think they're the age of the scion wood. If I graft a piece of 30-year-old wood from a tree in the prime fruiting stage onto a 1-year-old rootstock, that tree will think it's 30 years old. This is why grafted fruit trees tend to produce fruit immediately. They think they're in their prime and it's time to produce peak amounts of fruit, and they just don't realize that they're just a baby. While grafted fruit trees provide huge advantages in terms of disease resistance and quick fruiting, it's the age gap between the rootstock and the scion wood that can cause this alternate bearing cycle. Seed-grown fruit trees rarely go through alternate bearing cycles because the trees grow through its natural timeline of aging. By the time the trees are genetically old enough to fruit, they are well-established, large trees with huge root systems. With grafted fruit trees, they try to produce like they're a big, strong tree, but they're really sitting on baby roots that may not be well-established and a trunk with a relatively small caliper. Because of this problem, if a grafted fruit tree decides to overproduce fruit too early in its lifespan, this can completely exhaust the very young tree. The exhausted tree will then have to spend the next season trying to recover and regain its strength instead of producing fruit. This is why grafted fruit trees are prone to falling into this alternate bearing cycle. And that's exactly what happened to me this season. This is my Owari Satsuma's 3rd year in ground, and it's going through an alternate bearing year for me. That's because last year, my little tree set an incredible number of mandarins. I harvested over 50 fruits from this tree last December, and at the time this tree was only about 2/3 of the size that it is now. I knew deep down in my gut that I could pay a price for this, but I ignored it because I was so excited to get my first big harvest. This tree's first season, it only produced 4 mandarins for me, and I wanted the biggest harvest I could get. Well, I got greedy and I should have listened to my gut, because this year I'm paying the price with a diminished harvest. Now I'm going to take you in for a closer look on this tree, because it's absolutely amazing how this alternate bearing cycle is manifesting. If you draw a line directly through the middle of the tree, the left side of the tree is all flush with fruits, but after the center line of the trunk, if you move to the right, there are no fruits anywhere on the tree. So it's almost acting like Two-Face. It just fruited on one side. If you can see right here, the tree is absolutely loaded on the left side. It's looking great, healthy as a horse. There are green satsumas everywhere as far as the eye can see. Down here, there are tons of fruit. So the left side of this tree looks absolutely divine. But I'll take you over to the other side of the tree, and you'll notice here is roughly the center line. You'll see all these fruits over to the left, but there's nothing to the right. And if I come over to this side, all of these branches over here to the right of the center of the trunk, they are fruitless. And it's not just an issue with this being the shadier side, because these branches fruited fine last year. It just seems to be that I let it overfruit and overbear, and it was probably stressed, and I guess it just produced on the sunny side of the tree, because here on the shady side there's absolutely no fruit. And it's just a wild thing to see, but this is an alternate bearing pattern. Now the good news is there are ways that you can help prevent an alternate bearing cycle. The first one is a given. Make sure your tree is getting adequate sunshine and a generous amount of fertilizer, especially while the tree is young. Most fruit trees need at least 6 hours of direct, unfiltered sunshine to fruit, and most want more like 8 to 10 hours. Furthermore, make sure you're fertilizing your tree throughout the growing season. Young fruit trees lack the intricate root systems necessary for finding nutrients, so it's important to supplement your trees when they're young. Regardless of your tree's age, you should ensure that you're adding fresh compost and mulch every single season, which you can see I place branches underneath my tree to keep them adequately mulched. I also put down hardwood mulch, and I add compost in the spring every single year. And it's important to constantly amend your soil with organic matter to keep the worms, bacteria, and fungi happy, as well as fertilize with granulated organic fertilizer 2 to 3 times a season just to give them a boost. However, when these trees are young, I like to give them some fast-acting water-soluble fertilizers like Miracle Grow or Jack's water-soluble crystals mixed with liquid fish emulsion to give them a boost when they're young and help them establish. Once their roots mature, you can probably skip the solubles, but they are beneficial to help them get started. Always make sure they have the solar energy and nutrients they need to fruit well for you. The second one is less obvious. Young grafted fruit trees should have their fruit loads manually thinned if they overbear to prevent an alternate bearing cycle. If your young fruit tree is loaded and being weighed down with its fruits, it's probably a good idea to remove a significant number of them. This will prevent your tree from exhausting itself with a fruit load the rest of the tree can't maintain, which should help keep it out of an alternate bearing cycle. So how do you know that your fruit tree is overstressed with too much fruit? Well, you just have to use your best judgment. Ask yourself, can a tree this young and small support all of this fruit? Or does the fruit load look totally ridiculous and silly? This tree last year, it was blatantly obvious that it was overbearing because the little tree was just overwhelmed with fruit and it was sagging, but I let it go anyway. If the tree is clearly overbearing, start cutting off the young fruits. And the earlier you do this, the better. Try to thin the fruit load when the fruits are something like nickel or quarter sized. Don't wait until they're larger than the size of golf balls, or you may have already exhausted the tree to get to that point. The other problem with heavy fruit loads is a young tree can, and often will, have its branches snap under the weight of the fruit. If the tree is sagging under heavy fruit load, you are going to want to thin the crop just to protect the tree. If I were to have done this last year, I would be having a much bigger and better harvest this year. Instead, I'm just relieved that I'm at least going to get something off of half the tree this season. The good news is the diminished fruiting cycle on this tree will ensure that next year my tree will be fully recharged for its 4th harvest, and after that I will have a 5+ year old tree on my hands, and it will start getting to the point where the roots and the caliper of the trunk are mature enough that the caliper is likely to carry it through and avoid any alternate bearing years from here on out. Now, there are some fruit trees out there that are naturally alternate bearing. A lot of nut trees bear biennially, and you just can't get around that. However, ensuring proper fruit set management, along with making sure your tree gets adequate sunshine and fertilizer, will help prevent typical annual bearing trees from getting stuck in this alternate bearing cycle when young. So everybody, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please hit that like button and ring the notification bell to be notified for future videos. If you want to know about the products I use in my garden, they're all linked in my Amazon storefront down below in the video description, and also check out the merch in my spread shop in the video description as well. Thank you again so much for watching, and both Dale and I hope to see all of you again back here on the next video. Good job, buddy. Nice appearance. Dale's upstairs. We're gonna take him for a walk. I'm gonna get his attention. Whoa, here he comes! Whoa, here comes the beast! He's so excited. Dale, you wanna go for a walk? You wanna go for a walk, buddy? Walk time? Come here, let me put your collar on. Okay, buddy, let's go get your harness. Come on, let's go get your harness. Get your harness. There's Dale, all ready for his walk, looking very professional in his canine harvest. Little do they know he's more of a juvenile delinquent than an officer dog. Right, buddy? You little delinquent, you. You're my favorite delinquent. Such a good boy.